few years back, my wife and I were hanging out at a local bookstore. We were killing time. We had dropped our vehicle off at a detailing shop to have it detailed. And we had gotten the text from the detailing company that our vehicle was ready, time to come pick it up. So we start collecting our things. We were drinking some coffee, reading some books, and a woman, 40-ish, late 30s, Caucasian, was just coming in as we were beginning to pack our stuff up. And she was dressed in business attire, and she had her satchel with her. She put it down, hurried up, opened up her iPad or whatever gadget it was she was using, receives an incoming call, and she sits down and she just goes on. The other person didn't even have time to say hello. She was FaceTiming somebody. We would soon determine in the 90 seconds or so it took us to get out of there while we heard this. You could not have been there and not heard the discussion. And other people in the store were actually giving this woman dirty looks for being too loud. It was her life coach, and she starts just going off about how, okay, I've got my husband taking my daughter to soccer on these days. I take our son to his sport on these days. I don't have time to cook meals, but I've figured out how to overcome that. I slice up all these vegetables and fruits and I lay them out on the table, and everybody knows where they are. And at the end of the day, I know they're gone. So I know that my family's eating it. She goes, business is going well, but I missed an appointment last week and I might have lost a customer. And I am getting my workout in right before I go to bed. And I think it's working out great because I'm so exhausted by then. I don't even remember going to bed. I just know I wake up the next morning to start it all over again. Then she says, I can't think of anything else I could possibly do to be a good mother, to be a good wife, to be a good, she was in sales, that I'm not doing, but I still feel like something's missing. What is it? And as we were leaving, we heard her life coach say, it's not about what's missing. It's about finding what needs to go. I'm telling you, like I've been telling you, you are overexerting yourself and this never ends well. And then we left and we went and we got our car. Well, my wife says, when we get outside of that coffee shop / bookstore, she says, man, that woman's crazy. Now, for those of you who watch my channel and have been for some time, you know that my wife is not from here. She's from Asia. We met after I'd been there for some time. I lived there for several years. We met there, fell in love there, had a child there. And we live here now. We've been here for several years. And so I had to say to her, honey, that woman, crazy is the wrong word. I mean, she's certainly overextended. I said, but honey, you have no idea the differences between what women are expected to do or be, or how they're expected to live in this culture versus, Eastern culture. And so I kind of explained to her a little bit about how, and this is where it gets hairy. And I'm going to use my favorite disclaimer here. I can only control what I say. I cannot control how you take what I say. So keep that in mind and listen to me as I explain what it is I'm saying here. I said, honey, in our culture, in Western culture, and especially in American culture, a lot of women are led to believe by a lot of people, parents, professors in college, peers. There's a lot of peer pressure for this, that you not only are supposed to, if you choose to get married and have a family, have a husband, have children, that's great, but you're also expected to get your education, have a career, be as successful as any man you work with, if not more. And my wife says to me, but how can one person do it all? No one can serve two masters. And I said to her, honey, you've kind of brought up the $50 million dilemma here that a lot of people struggle with so greatly, to a very great degree. As a man, I never felt as if I were even in a position to give an opinion or state what I think about it. But I'm going to today for a particular reason. It's because of a book I read yesterday in one day. And I want to point out to you, this is the first time, and I read 2 books a week. So I read a book every 3 days or so, 3 or 4 days. This is the first time I've read an entire book in one day. In probably 6 or 7 years. I remember the last one I read in one day was The Martian Chronicles, a novel by Ray Bradbury. This book is nonfiction, and man, did it open my eyes. And so as I speak today about the things I'm going to talk about, I want you to know these views came by the book's author, who is a woman. It's a book called Her Best Kept Secret: Why Women Drink and How They Can Regain Control. And it was written by Gabrielle Glasser. Here's a picture. Very accomplished journalist, and a wife and a mother. Gabrielle has had her work published in the New York Times, Mademoiselle, The Economist, Glamour, The Washington Post, and Health, among other publications. Now, to qualify the book, what am I doing reading this book called Her Best Kept Secret? A book that deals with the fact that women in America in the last decade especially have almost... the number of women who have succumbed to alcohol use dependency has literally doubled from the 1990s to our modern times. And as an investigative journalist, Gabrielle Glasser wanted to know why that was, and so she took an in-depth look into it and wrote a book about it. I kind of had some things I suspected confirmed, and I learned a whole heck of a lot. First of all, I read the book because I had a second person recommended to me. If somebody that I know, that I think highly of, somebody that I kind of value their opinion, value their advice, if they make a recommendation on a book, I'll read it. Even in the case of this example, it's a book written by women for women, because I know there's something to it, and there's going to be something I can get out of it. And man, did I get a lot out of this book when I read it. The first third of the book pretty much deals with the history of alcohol consumption in the United States. And it's not what you think. It's certainly not what I thought. I had no clue, because she does a historical analysis going all the way back to Jamestown, and actually predates that when we were, across the sea. But did you know that the settlers at Jamestown, men, women, and children, all drank more beer than they did water? Because where they settled, I'm in Virginia, we're in Charlottesville here today, 2.5 hours east of here, you hit Jamestown. And just this past summer, my family and I went to Jamestown, and we visited the settlements. It was hard to find clean drinking water. Much of the water there was brackish, because they were so close to the ocean. The brackish water would come in at high tide. Anytime there were storms, the water would come in. It was literally safer to drink beer than it was to drink water. And as such, as Western expansion took place, going from Jamestown, heading out west to make this great nation even bigger and greater than it was at the time, they took more beer with them and wine than they did water, again, for the same reason. So it was interesting, and nobody had a problem with it. Even, and Mrs. Glasser points this out in her book, the Puritans, a lot of people erroneously attribute Prohibition, not really. It did start with the Puritans, but they attribute the wrong reason why Prohibition was pushed for by the Puritans. And it's not because people drank, it's because people started getting drunk, okay? Puritans drank, and she gave examples in her book. She cites her sources, okay? People would often, when they would go to church on whatever their day of worship was, there was generally a pub or a saloon in every small community. People would gather at the pub, warm their hands at the fire, warm their bellies with a shot of this new drink that had entered our society and our culture by this time, which was rum. Then they'd go to church, and they'd worship, and they'd pray to God. And they would focus on not sinning, but they would drink. They would drink every day, the men, the women, and even the children. Well, what happened is when rum was introduced into our society and our culture, here began the problems of drunkenness. Even the Bible says, and I think it's the book of Matthew, be ye not drunk on spirits, whereas in excess, but be filled with the Spirit, which suggests, you want to drink moderately, okay, but hey, don't get drunk. Well, people started getting drunk because rum was 5 times stronger as far as alcohol content goes than was the wine, which wasn't really made in abundance at the time. That would come later, but the beer was common. So the Puritan leaders didn't like the fact that people got drunk and made asses of themselves and did harm. So that's when they started pushing towards prohibition. Finally came, but now, okay, so first third is about the history of drink. The second third of the book is about the history of women's suffrage and the gains they made, the tremendous gains they made over the course of the last century. I didn't know this, but by 1910, according to her book, there were as many women enrolling in college and going to college as there were men. And this is where women began drinking socially, or at least more so out of the house, away from the family. It was becoming common. And, if you walk across any college campus, I could go up here and go to UVA. You go out there on game day, people are tailgating, or if it's on the weekend and it's party night, you see an equal mix of men and women out there imbibing. But things changed with Prohibition. I'll tell you, you got to read this book just to find out some of this crazy history. There was a woman, and perhaps you've heard of her. Her name was Carrie Nation. And when I first saw her name in the book, because her name was spelled Carry and then Nation, just like nation, I thought the author was referring to these people that are big time guns rights activists, because I've heard them referred to as Carrie Nation. This is America, everybody's carrying. But no, that was her name, Carrie Nation. She was an anti-alcohol person. She referred to herself as Jesus's bulldog running at his heels. She took an axe and she would go from community to community, town to town, settlement to settlement, and she would just barge into the saloons and she would smash up all the alcoholic containers, all the beverages, the barrels that held the stuff. She just smashed them up. She was arrested 39 times over a period of several years. And the way she paid her court costs and paid her bail money to get out of jail was by doing speaking engagements. Other people who were opposed to the consumption of alcohol or the legal selling, purchasing, consumption of alcohol would pay her for speaking engagements. Well, Prohibition came around finally 1919. Is when the law, they voted on it. Went into effect in 1920, stayed in effect until 1933. And as you know, everybody's drinking secretly at home. Everybody's doing the speakeasies. I'm going to say it anyway. I caught myself. I was going to say, and in their infinite wisdom, the government. Can you ever really start a sentence like that? In their infinite wisdom, the government. But you know what I mean, right? They decided to finally legalize it again in Prohibition because they wanted to tax and regulate. Because the government knows, hey, if we can tax and regulate something, there's money in it for us. We were in the Great Depression. They viewed it as part of the way to come out of it, and it worked. I mean, the money that went into the tax coffers was huge because of the legal sale of alcohol. And then, of course, people were able to work in the industry again legally, which provided jobs for a lot of folks who were unemployed. Cut down on crime, go figure, because the gangsters weren't out there shooting each other over their barrels of bourbon and whatnot. It was all legal, so cut crime. Now, what does this have to do with women and drinking and being mothers and wives and sisters and professionals and holding down careers, small business owners? After World War II, if you know your history, women jumped into the workforce in record numbers. Now, they were always there, but they were always, there were certain positions. Teaching was a big one. If you were a woman prior to 1900 and you worked, you were probably a teacher. Well, hey, we remember Rosie the Riveter, girl power. World War II onward, we now see women in factories. We see them doing labor jobs. We see them when we need an attorney, they're lawyers. We have a lieutenant governor for the first time in the state of Virginia here who is a woman, and not just that, but black and an immigrant. So many leaps and bounds. They've come so far, okay? Now, according to the book, it was somewhere after, the baby boomers. So it was after the World War II generation, the baby boomers. This is probably the first generation of women in America who from birth were able to get their education, pursue a career just like all the men, because the generation before them during the war, these women were just coming into this. A lot of these women had not gotten higher education past high school. They'd gone straight into motherhood and all this stuff, and then they were coming into the workforce from there. Baby boomers, no, they were like, oh, that's the playing field, let me level this. They came through here like bulldozers. They went off to good colleges, they got good degrees. If you look around now, a lot of you are baby boomers. 70-some% of my viewers I know are my age or older. So you're either a baby boomer or your parents a baby boomer. A lot of us, my generation, my mother didn't work outside of the home. She had, and this is my humble opinion, the hardest job anyone could have. Being an at-home mom, taking care of kids, staying on top of everything, getting no pay and no respect. But there were women who were doing all that and going out with their educations and having careers and kicking ass in the business world. But something happened with the next generation, my generation, Gen X, when, okay, this is now the norm. This is what you're supposed to do. Why couldn't you look at all the hard work, women who went through suffrage, Susan B. Anthony, who, by the way, was an abolitionist, or I'm sorry, not an abolitionist. She opposed the consumption of alcohol, but according to this book, she did it because she kind of needed to be able to be heard by people in government who were also favoring kind of banning alcohol consumption. That got her foot in the door so she could move forward with suffrage and get women the right to vote and all that stuff. So it's kind of like she had to give a little bit to get what it was she wanted. It's negotiation 101. So the current generation of women out there in the workforce and the one before them, my generation, are in this great dilemma that my wife witnessed that day in that coffee shop / bookstore. She saw this woman, and this woman, she carried herself well. She was attractive. She came across as professional. But when she started talking and you heard all of her concerns come out of her mouth, you could tell she was overwhelmed. She was simply overwhelmed. This lady was doing everything she could in every aspect of her life, and she still felt as if she was falling short, and she wanted to know what more could she do. And again, her life coach says it's not about what more can you do. We need to take a look at some things that you probably shouldn't be doing because you're overextended. That's what this lady is saying in this book she wrote. She says one of the negatives of this is that there are a lot of women who are overextended, and so they have been self-medicating with alcohol. So now we're in a situation where you got all these women completely stressed out. The way they're dealing with it is by, and she pointed out, there's wine, the wine industry. Basically, women drinkers have defined the wine industry in America. If you go to any place where you can buy wine and you see all these fruity, flavorful, effeminate drinks, and she says in the book even, a lot of them have feminine names, like Chardonnay itself sounds very feminine, does it not? Women by far are the largest consumers of wine over men in America. That's their drink of choice. And in the last decade or so, she points out how record numbers of women are coming to the realization that they have a problem with alcohol. Here comes the next problem they're facing. And man, she opened my eyes when she wrote about this. The woman who was the second woman to suggest this book to me is a woman that I know through a group of friends I visit. Listen, it's not AA. I'm going to put that out there right now. It's not Alcoholics Anonymous. But I have a group of like-minded people. Some are men, some are women. And we focus on all-around health. Physical health. We exercise. Dietary health. We watch what we eat. Mental and spiritual health. We focus on our thinking. Are we thinking clearly? Are we thinking logically? Are we thinking toxically? Because as you think, as you speak, there you are. Thoughts are so powerful. And there was a lady in the group that suggested this book. And the reason why is because of her experience she had with alcohol. And I have had throughout the years my own experiences and unhealthy relationships at times with alcohol. Basically, if you have cancer in America, you go to the doctor, you will get the most updated, most advanced, most current treatment in regard to cancer that you can get on planet Earth. And the science stays up to pace as it can. It evolves as it can in regard to cancer, in regard to diabetes, in regard to every known illness we have, because this is what science and medicine does. With addiction, it's not so. It's not the case. If you have a problem with alcohol and you go to your doctor, most likely your doctor is going to, well, number one, and she points this out in the book, he might take a sample of your liver enzymes, and if the numbers come back and you're perfectly healthy, the doctor may tell you, and there's an example she uses in this book, then no, you're fine. You don't have a problem with alcohol. Look at your liver count. You're perfectly healthy. But if you know you're drinking 1.5 bottles of Chardonnay every night because you're so stressed out from closing that, real estate sale, that house, that you know what it's like when you close a house. For those of you who bought, you have to reset that date so many times. Everybody's ready to go. The lender, the home inspection, the seller, the buyer, until the minute of close, and everybody starts beating each other about the heads with little hammers, and you got to schedule that a few days later. Nobody's ever ready. So you got all that stress. On top of that, you're self-medicating with alcohol. You know you've got a problem. You know this isn't healthy. You know you're waking up the next day missing. The first half of your day is never productive because you're, getting over your hangover. But here's your doctor saying, oh, no, you're fine because, your liver count looks fine. No, it's not. Okay, or let's say the doctor says, oh, wow, you're right. Your liver count's a little bit messed up. You know what? You need to go to AA. Since 1935 or 33 or whenever it was, since AA was founded, AA has been the go-to for people who have issues with alcohol use dependency, AUD. The old term is alcoholism. That's what they still use in AA. That's been the only go-to. And as the author points out in the book, it was a program started by men for men. Women didn't start coming into the program until sometime later, and even then in limited numbers. And now, and these are her words in the book, not mine, one of the problems with that program is that they are facing a crisis similar to that of the Catholic Church a decade before, where there is some abuses going on that shouldn't be, and it's being hushed. It's being covered up. There's a litany of stories in the book about women down to and not all of them were, middle-aged professionals who were stressed out. Some of them were young women. There's one story, the girl was 17. She knew she had a problem with drinking, so she goes to AA because that's what the only solution, and this was about 30 years ago, and the next thing you know, adult men are doing things with her that adult men should not be doing with 17-year-old girls. And nobody's saying a thing, because when the girl goes to her sponsor and says, this happened, the sponsor says, and this is AA's go-to, when you have a problem, something happened in your life, there's a situation you're not comfortable with, your sponsor will say, well, what's your part in it? And the author of this book points that out, about how there's an assumption that any problem you have is your fault, to a degree at least, because, well, you had a part in it. Why were you there? This is similar to, and she points this out in the book, her words, not mine, blaming a victim of rape. She met with a woman who had been in AA for 35 years. Big pro-AA woman. She led meetings. She was part of the local chapter who dealt with the money, took the money that people put their dollar in the basket or whatever every meeting. She made sure it got sent up to their home office in New York so they could continue to expand. This woman became aware of a couple of other women who had been abused by people in the program, because one of them went to a meeting and just let it out and cried, and she didn't attend this meeting regularly, and she said she had gone to her sponsor, and her sponsor pretty much said, well, what was your part in it? Well, she explained her part in it. This girl, she was 25, when she went to meetings, because she was court ordered, mind you, she'd gotten a DUI, I believe it was. You can I'm telling you, read the book. Even if you don't feel you have a problem with alcohol, the history alone in this, I'm a big history buff, is I read it in a day. She writes as if she's speaking to you, like she's talking to you, and I didn't mean to read it in a day. I got my kid on the bus at like a little bit after 7 a.m., and I always read till about 8 before I go out for my run here in the winter, let it warm up. I looked at my watch and it was 1:30, and I was like, well, may as well just keep reading and run later. And that's what I did. It was like 2:30. I'd finished the whole book, and then I went for my run. You can't put it down. So anyway, this girl, she goes to AA. She was not putting up with any hanky panky. She had heard the stories, and she kept mace in her purse or something. And so guys would come up to her after the meeting and ask her, hey, you want to go out for coffee or whatever? She would show them the mace and say, no, I'm fine. Come up. Yeah, you want to ride home? She'd show them the mace. No, I'm fine. Well, there was a time where this guy just kept following her around the block. It's a guy that had talked to her for a couple times. Following her around the block in the car, saying, look, I can't let you walk home after dark by yourself. Let me just give you a ride. She finally said, okay, got in the car with the guy. He ends up going into her apartment with her, and so her problem became that for the next few months, this guy was living with her, rent-free, making demands, physical demands, if you know what I mean. I'm doing my best to keep it PG rated. And she goes to her sponsor, and her sponsor says, well, what was your part in it? So this really upset the woman that had 35 years in the program. She tried to have something done about it. She spent years trying to get something done about it. Points out in the book, they had these same problems in the program in Australia and in England. You know what they did? They dealt with it. And in those meetings, it stated when they're reading the preamble at the beginning, if you are known to abuse anyone in this program, physically, sexually, etc., you will be prosecuted. Yeah, but I guess over here, according to what's in the book, the American chapter pretty much said, oh no, we're afraid we might violate someone's anonymity. So the author feels as if the one and only solution of going to AA just is not working for women. It's not working for a lot of men either. Let me tell you, you get it there in different ways. This idea of everything that happened bad to you is somehow your fault. And also, I could tell you stories, but that would get us off point here. Maybe in other videos in the future I will. But the final chapter of this book was so refreshing because, listen, there are other solutions out there than just the 1933 male-dominated AA. You know, if you get raped, whatever, we're not going to prosecute your attacker because that might break their anonymity. There are science-based and medical-based programs out there. And if you do a Google search, she pointed out in the book, and this was key, that the woman who finally said, that's it with AA, I can't continue to be part of a group who's going to allow this to happen. She did a Google search for non-12-step recovery. It's everywhere. One of the biggest is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And just so you'll know, that group of friends I have that I meet with, that's kind of what we do in regard to triggers. Listen, she points out in the book that AA does work for a very small percentage of people. It's hard to know the actual numbers because you can't do scientific-based, non-biased studies. You can't have controlled groups because if you go to AA and say, okay, we're going to do this study, they're knowing they're in the study. It's not a blind group. But the number she uses is about 8%. AA works for about 8% of people. 8% of people can go to AA, never drink again. Well, the other 92% are told by those in AA, and she points out in the book that what I'm about to say is going to be considered heresy, and I know that it will, due to my experience with that program. The other 92% are in denial, haven't hit bottom yet, all these things. No, or the big one, they didn't do the steps, or if they did, they didn't do them correctly. No, just didn't work for them. Just didn't work for them. And to be led to believe that that's it, all or nothing, you can either go to AA, do these 12 steps, do everything your sponsor tells you, even if that's cover up, the fact that you were raped, because you don't want to blow that guy's anonymity. And if it doesn't work for you, then you're the problem. It's not true. So there are other ways out there. Cognitive behavior therapy is a big one, working with therapists. They're actually medications now. And the author of the book went on and on about how sickening it is, and it really is, about how for example, cancer, she uses that as her example throughout the book, has come so far with medical treatments, with medications and all these things. And she points out in the book, let's say somebody has cancer, they go to chemo, they go through this horrendous round of chemo, makes them sick, makes them weak, but at the end of the treatment, they still have the cancer. That's not their fault. It's not because they did the chemo wrong. The doctor doesn't say, well, what's your part in this? You still have that cancer. No, they keep going. They keep researching. They keep using science, using medicine. There are medications out there for alcohol use disorder. I'm not going to name them. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to be part of misinformation. But there are medications out there, one which numbs the receptors of the endorphins or of the dopamines your brain releases so that you don't get that feel-good feeling when you're drinking your drink. So if you have a problem with alcohol, if you can't control your number of drinks, you take this medication about an hour before you drink, and once you've had your drink or two, and where you would normally start getting that feel-good, just one more feeling, well, you don't get it. Mind you, it dulls the receptors, it doesn't affect any endorphins that are being released, because these are the same endorphins you get when you exercise or when you have sex. Because at first, a guy like me, hey, I enjoy both those other things. You might be hesitant to take this stuff, but no, it doesn't affect that. It only affects the receivers in regards to the alcohol. So I think I got that correct. Read the book. I'm telling you, read the book. So there's medication, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, and one of the biggest things is, I mentioned earlier, triggers. Hey, if you got to go to that bottle every night because you did these 28 million things throughout your day that, society and culture tells you you're supposed to do and that you believe you're supposed to do, and it ends up with that drink in your hand, drinking to excess, look at the triggers. You don't have to overextend yourself. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to cut a few things out of your life. And in the book, she used an example of a woman who was signing her kids up for everything. She was doing all this extra stuff for the organization she belonged to. She was just like that woman that my wife and I saw that day in that bookstore, in that coffee shop. The woman in the book, she was using CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Her therapist said, let's take out this, let's take out that. Let your kids choose the activities they want to choose. And in the book, this woman's children, she had a son and a daughter, they continued to participate in activities, but they were different than the ones that the parents, because the father was doing it as well, were signing them up to. It's the ones they wanted to do. Turns out they were closer to home. They were spending less time commuting, and both of those children, as of the writing of the book, were in college. They were in college. They were doing well. I believe one was in grad school. So everything turned out all right anyway. Mom/businesswoman was not overextended, and she was able. A lot of the drinkers in the book, some of them never drink again, but that's not the goal of a lot of them. Some of them just want to control it. Many of them have become occasional social drinkers at special occasions, meaning maybe on the 4th of July, maybe at Christmas. Yeah. But it's not like AA, where AA says it's either all or nothing. You either become a teetotaler and quit, never touch it again, or you're going to get, those DUIs, you're going to kill a bunch of people, you're going to beat your wife, you're going to do all these terrible things, and the only place for you is jails, institutions, and death. No. Maybe for that 8%. But the other 92, no. Kind of got out of control, and those other 92% may be able, and probably, and more than likely are able to drink responsibly, like all the commercials say. So I'll tell you, whether you're a man or a woman, read the book. Whether you have a drinking problem or not, read the book. It's a great read just for the history of it. If you're a man, I would impress upon men to read this book more than women. Because, listen, women get it. They know it. They're living this life already. Men, I saw so much of the other side of the coin in reading this book than I had before. I thought that part of myself was misogynistic, piggish, and all this stuff, because I have friends who are these women. They're excellent mothers. They're excellent wives. Their husbands love them. I talk to their husbands when they're not around. They're grateful to have these women as their wives and have their life's partners. And they're excellent at what they do professionally. But you can just see it. I just knew, like, how can you do that? I couldn't do it. It's possible, yes. And not all of the women who do these superwomen things do get stressed out. Not all of them have alcohol use dependency issues. I know that. But if you're out there and you're one of them and you're saying, OMG, is this guy watching me secretly somehow? That's my life. Read the book, okay? And I'm going to stop now because I've been talking for over 36 minutes. I can't imagine how many things I've said to get myself in trouble. I can assure you it's not intentional. I'm really doing my best here to kind of see the way other people live through the eyes of someone who really doesn't have the ability to see that because of, I don't know, maybe my gender, I guess. But you've got to read this. I highly recommend this. Her Best Kept Secret. Tell you what, I liked it so much, I'm going to read some more of Gabrielle Glasser's other books. She's an excellent writer. She thoroughly did her research. She, even though she doesn't identify as someone that has AUD, even attended AA meetings, studied that program inside and out to get her information for the book. It's not like she went to AA, did the steps, they didn't work for her, so now she's out to crucify AA. That's not it, though I'm sure members of AA will accuse her of that. This is just a well-written book by a very informed, educated, knowledgeable woman who happens to be an exceptionally great writer. So, with that said, I hope you have a great day. See you for more next time.